Why, hello. This is the Sober Atheist Podcast. This is John Huey, and I am here with my co host, Michael Tingley, as always.
Hello?
And we have come to episode 24, which is the second part of a two-parter. And I would urge anybody that hasn't listened to the first part, which is episode 23, maybe scroll back and look at that one. But this is a standalone topic in and of itself, connected to that. And just to reiterate, the original title of this two-parter was A Question of Love and Hate, Dealing with Strong Emotions as an Atheist in Recovery. And this is part two, dealing with the all too problematic word hate. I don't know how we're going to get our arms around this one,
I
but
kind of hate that word.
yeah, I know you do because you're an old hippie. I'm not. I was a very bad. You were a good hippie. I was a bad hippie. Remember, I was the bad, cynical hippie. You were the good, nice hippie. Okay, all right. You were more San Francisco, even though you lived in New York. My attitude was more New York. What can I say? All right. Jerry Garcia and Lou Reed on the screen. What can I tell you? But here we're going to go take a bite out of this word that's very problematic for both the cynical and the, and the love bugs, because it's equally harmful to everyone. And particularly people that are in recovery from drugs and alcohol. I would think you would probably agree with that, Michael.
Yeah. It's one of those strong feelings that goes right along with the resentments and fear and everything else that drives us crazy.
All the other problematic things
Yeah.
that come up particularly when you're drinking the rocket fuel or you're using dope, the rocket fuel and the disorder that ensues comes into, exacerbating any strong emotion. And it's real easy because there's a lot of stuff to hate in this world. All right. If you're going to grab on to that, there is a lot of stuff out there. And, what did we hate in life and why did we hate it? That's something that figures into recovery because as part of, clearing up some of the cloudiness and the, disorder mentally, when we begin to recover, we have to encounter and deal with, or we normally, I believe most people do encounter and deal with, some of the internal wreckage that ensued from grabbing on to things that you really hate and those emotions being exacerbated and being used as fuel for self-destruction. So it's heap big medicine. Is somebody asked me once what was LSD like, and I said, well, LSD is heap big medicine. That's why I don't take it no more. Okay, it's too big a medicine for this kid. And hate is a really, tough medicine to get yourself around. All right, and what types of things do we hate? That's something to maybe think about for a second. Different people hate different things. All right. There are a lot of people running around the United States right now that hate pointy-headed liberals like me that live in a community where 94% of the people vote Democratic, for example.
Right.
Some people latch on to externals that define people and start chewing on that, right? I'm just as guilty of that as anybody. But thinking back, my drinking days were a long time ago now. I mean, if I stay on planet Earth till this coming January 3rd, that will be 39 years ago when I gave up that poison. But there was a lot of excess, and I seem to recall, you know, uh, 2 a.m. rants about stuff that I really hated. But it's hard to conjure it up now because it was just so much shit that I hated
Hmm.
back then. And, undifferentiated uh, anxiety mixed with aggression fueled by hate. That that happens to people when they're in that state. And I'm happy to report that in my case, my main thing was alcohol. By that time, by 1987, I'd pretty much given up all my doping days long before, but I certainly was a devoted drinker for many years. And at age 38, I was a terrible mess, but I did, man, it did seem to lower the temperature. That's a good thing about sobriety. This thing we call hate and this undifferentiated hate and aggression that many people engage in when they're drinking. Um, do you agree? I mean, I that's what I've observed, Michael. I mean, do you
Well, yeah,
subscribe to that?
I think there's a distinction to be made between hate and anger, and if they are one and the same or not. I have a hard time distinguishing between the two, and I maybe because I am a child of Woodstock, I don't identify with the word hate as much as I identify with the word anger. I mean, I can be angry at things. I don't. There aren't a lot of things that I could say clearly that I have hated. I've been
Well,
angry about a lot of things, and I've
right.
been disappointed lately. I mean, I don't feel hate lately about the shit that's going down on this planet, but I feel so sad and disappointed by the terrible human behavior all over the planet that I can't call that hate, and I can't even call that angry at this point. I mean, it's just sad. I'm
Well,
saddened by all that stuff.
there's that sadness. Well, we'll go into that in a minute because this inevitably is going to flow over into that. But
So when you're talking about having hate,
anger
was it because
anger
you were
is
angry at things?
anger to me, I'm going to make a distinction between anger and hate, whether
Okay.
you agree with it or not. That's what we'll
Yeah.
chat about. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I think to me, anger is more situational, where something happens, something specific happens. Uh, like in the old days, maybe somebody disrespects you,
Mm-hmm.
or you're working in a shitty job and something on your shitty job as a young person makes you angry, some slight or some uh, level of just hassle happens and it makes you angry, right? Hate, on the other hand, seems to me to be this undifferentiated thing where you're putting negativity out into the universe in general.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a distinction. That's not necessarily how most people or even everyone would define it. But when I think about the two things, I know they're different. Okay, anger is one thing, hatred is another.
Well, hatred. When I think of hatred, I think of examples like bigotry. For me, that's the definition of hatred. When somebody hates someone irrationally just because of the color of their skin or their sexuality, whatever it is, that kind of bigotry is how I define hate and hatred.
Well, hate
And
is, yeah,
yeah, so
hate can
it's
take over whole cultures and societies.
I mean, it has an irrationality to it. Whereas anger, there's a little bit more of a rational basis to be angry.
Yeah, there's something happened. Hate is sort of an undifferentiated thing in a lot of minds. But there's so much hate in the world right now that we can't avoid it. No matter what your personal opinion is about it, we can't avoid it, and we have to deal with it. Okay. Um, I remember when I was a kid, both my parents were in World War II, and they were big. They were military people and were very patriotic, and they hated the Japanese. All right, and they hated the Axis powers, and Mussolini and Hitler. They there was a lot. There was hatred there. I mean, back in the Great War, there were posters that were basically racist, up
Sure.
depicting people in that way.
Yeah, in World War One, it was the Germans.
And
Yeah,
and
and
when I
sure.
was a little kid, I saw hatred. I remember on the old black and white TV seeing dogs being let loose on African American people,
Yeah, that's the kind of hatred that that
and
defines
and
it for
and
me.
and and people spewing hate, right?
Yeah,
But it gets
irrational hate.
right.
Yeah,
That's on the macro kind of level with this hate thing. All right.
right, right.
I've known people in situations where people really hate other people, like specifically. And I've seen a lot of situations where relationships can go from love to hate, right? And with that in you, things get very messy. And when you pour alcohol or drugs on top of that, things get even messier if you're hating somebody you happen to be living with. That happens all the time.
Yeah, there's no holding back when you're under the
I mean,
influence.
obviously, our prisons and jails are filled with people
Yep.
that let hate take over their lives in terms of their personal relationships.
Right.
I was lucky in that I didn't feel hatred per se for anyone that close to me, but there were people that I met along the way that I could say that I probably hated them, right? I just couldn't stand them. And that kind of thing for an alcoholic or addict is in fact corrosive. Is in
Isn't
fact
it corrosive for anybody?
It's
Any
corrosive for
human.
anybody, but
Yeah.
it's particularly corrosive for us if we're using, right?
Yeah.
Or if it puts us in a situation or a condition where we would start using again, right?
Yeah.
This is a loaded word. This episode is going to be sort of undifferentiated because of the loaded nature of, like people look at the title and say, "Well, who the hell are these old guys?" Talking about something like this, all right? Well, that's because it's important and it figures into uh, the world of recovery that we happen to inhabit, and that world of recovery, that tiny little subset of the world of recovery that we inhabit, is people who are atheists.
So, the bottom line is, what do you think is the advantage or disadvantage of
Well, there's a,
having
it's a,
a lack of faith under these circumstances,
it's
as
it's
opposed
a,
to being
it's
a believer?
it's it's if you're a believer, right, in various religious traditions, right, they will either tell you to stifle your hate and take it within you and pray to God to relieve the pain, right? Or they will codify it somehow, and you can go into a little booth and confess your sins, and all your hatreds and resentments can be absolved somehow. Or just in general, you can be told that, and it's partially true, that you can't afford hatred or resentment, and you have to shut that down as part of this spiritual discipline that we're applying to you now that you're in recovery. And for us, that doesn't fly. It doesn't work. So how in the hell do we deal with it as atheists in recovery? And like the endless loop and strip we keep going back over and over again, we come up with a something like, we apply rational thought and action to the things that are disturbing us and threatening us in recovery, in terms of things that could, in fact, take us back to a state where we're completely out of our minds on alcohol or drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but we have to take that upper mind and apply it, because we don't have anything outside of ourselves to take it to. All right? You ever heard the term God box
No.
in one of those program thingies?
God box?
God box, the
No,
God
no,
box.
no.
I used to hear people years ago say, well, you just have to put that in your God box. Okay. Because you
That's
have to take
convenient.
it, and as if it's gonna go. You got a little
Yeah,
box on
yeah.
the. Let's see. I got a box here. I got a little box on the desk, and I could just open it up here and put my hatred and resentment in my little God box, and close it up and put it over there. Okay, and that will contain
So
it and make it
it's
go away.
handing it off to somebody else instead of
Handing it off
embracing
rather.
your own
Right, right,
responsibility.
right,
Yeah.
right, right, right. Um, you know, we can't use terms that harm us. And the terms that people use to describe people that, and situations and places that they hate, are often harmful to them. All right.
Mhm.
Which brings us back now in recovery, both of us many years after the beginning of our recoveries, living in an age where hate is everywhere. It's spewed daily. It is part of our body politic. It has become a cultural reality and a cultural touchstone, and is an element in every major problem we are facing day to day. And as always, I've lived here in Washington all my life, so I'm particularly sensitized to the day to day reality of, people who are just basically hateful, right? Someone who stands on the White House lawn and spews hate. Someone who takes joy and glee in putting undocumented people behind a fence with alligators outside of the fence. And we had someone this morning who says he's the commander in chief of our armed forces, amongst other things. We had that person this morning before he got on his helicopter and went down to Alligator Alley. He was talking this morning about, well, how they've got to learn if they ever jump the fence, they can't run in a straight line. They have to run in a zigzag pattern to confuse the alligators. Because if they run in a straight line, the alligators are going to get them. So they'd better learn. God, he's given this information to the people that he's putting behind this fence, that if they ever get out there with the alligators, they better zigzag. That's hate, all right? That's racism. That's more than I can bear is
I
what
think
it
it's
is.
evil. It's just downright evil.
Is yeah, they better learn how to run zigzag pattern through the alligators that me and my buddy DeSantis put together down there for them to run through. And I don't know how to deal with that, all right? Because you know what that does, all right? That makes me hate them. The ones that are doing that, spewing that. It makes me hate them. And what are we going to do with this when we look at the corrosive nature to our own psyches and our own health, and we can't pray about it, or we can't give it away, or we can't put it in a little God box, okay, and run with it that way? What in the hell are we gonna do? We just have to come up with a rational system that protects us. Now, you're much more of a, nature boy than I am. But one of the things I do, even in the hottest weather, and the weather's been awful here in DC so far, we've had some really awful days. I've got my little postage stamp garden out here on the balcony with a lot of very nice plants there, and keeping them alive in 96-degree weather with 75% humidity is a challenge. And I'm out there trying to somehow connect with something that's beautiful and something that's peaceful and something that has nothing to do with any of this shit that I'm seeing. It's not day to day these days, Michael. It's hour to hour.
Oh yeah,
It's
I know.
hour to hour. It not only
Yep.
doesn't stop, it's not even day to day. It's hour to hour,
Right.
and this engenders some awful things within various types of people. All right, I'm not the I can be a pretty tough nut when I need to be, not necessarily when I want to be. I can be sort of a hard ass person. And when I combine that natural tendency of mine, which has served me well in certain situations, particularly in some difficult countries I've had to do business with and survive with over a long period of time, uh, I gotta somehow or another modify those tendencies, because the anxiety of hating, because here's what happens. You see the leader of horrible things, like in the old days my parents saw, Hitler and, Tojo and, Mussolini and all of them, and they managed to personify a lot of stuff about what was going on in those figures. It was, of course, propaganda. That's what happens when you have a world war. There's a lot of propaganda around. Uh, uh, but then you take that and you start to hate entire groups of people, which for an alcoholic or an addict is not a good, in my opinion, is not a good thing. It's not a good thing to have hatred in your heart for groups of people, uh, like the rich, for example. I never been rich. I had the opportunity to be rich several times, but I'm a good idea guy, but not a great business guy. So I never had I was never inducted into that particular fraternity. Um, but when you see wealthy, and I'm not just talking upper middle class people like my neighbors here in Bethesda with PhDs and law degrees and stuff like that make a really good living and live very nicely. It's a whole other level when you see people with enormous, disproportionate personal resources stealing from the least of us and putting more money in their pocket.
Yeah, there are very few positive examples of billionaires on this planet. And it's, I don't feel hate towards them. I feel disappointment and sadness and and sympathy. I mean, I feel sorry for them that their lives are so hate filled that they're spending their money in a negative, evil way. That's,
Well,
for me, that's not hate. It's just sadness and disappointment.
there's more than one type. I've had to remind myself before I get truly, over the edge with this hatred of this group of people that are
Yeah, there's got to
basically
be some positive examples somewhere, but
thieves.
still,
No,
overall, it's
I
hard. It's
actually,
hard not to generalize about the
yeah,
billionaires.
but you know what? To get my mind sort of straight about that, I actually, well, I've actually known a couple of billionaires. All right, and I've known that I wish I could say something good about Russian oligarchs and billionaires, but I can't. Okay, my
Yeah,
encounters there were, I mean, but by accident, I have an old friend who became one of these filthy rich people. Her and her husband started some companies overseas and they became incredibly filthy rich, right? I don't, just incredibly filthy rich. And I lost touch with this person, and somehow or another, we got back in touch some years ago when I was first, actually had to be around the time when I was first starting up with Russia about 20 years ago, a little over 21 years ago, that about that time frame. And what brought us back together was uh, somehow or another we had somehow or another linked up through a Facebook thingy or something like that. I don't even know what it was, but we got to talking about our old garage band when we were young, when I was young, and you know 18, 19, college kids. And we had always said we wish we had a tape of the band. And we thought whatever tapes there were lost. Well, then I found and reached out to another one of our old band members who I had had disagreements with and was not in regular communication with. But he said, come over to my house and we'll look. And we went into the basement and he started rummaging around and he said, let's look in this file cabinet. And in the bottom of the file cabinet were the tapes. I remember the damn boxes of the
cool.
tapes.
Mm-hmm.
So the tapes of the band were in the file cabinet. I said, just give me the tapes. I'll take care of them. So I took them. At the time, there was this really good audio engineer here in Bethesda. He no longer has the business, but actually was in a place just down the street from where I am now. And I took the tapes to this guy, and he did a beautiful job mastering a CD, which I, of course, put a label on. We called it this is really ironic, the Chevy Chase basement tapes. Talk about a waspy upper, kind of,
Yeah.
it's Chevy Chase basement tape. They were too bad, actually. I'll send you a copy sometime. But long and short of it is, this lady said, well, I'd love, it's been nice. I'd love to see you come up, bring this. I said, oh, I'm going to mail you a CD. She said, don't mail it. Come visit us. Right. And I go up to, I won't say exactly what part of the country, but it wasn't that far from Washington, but it was a part of the country where people with, well, it's a part of the country where they're billionaires, right? They're people that have a lot of money, right? And I get up to this place, and I was told, given this circuitous route, and got through this gate, security gate or whatever it was, and I'm going winding up to this incredibly large contemporary house, sort of nestled in the trees. And this friend of mine she was uh, really into horses, and I noticed this enormous horse barn, right, by and a couple people wandering around, and showed me into the place, and they got in there, and she doesn't like outdoor pools, so part of the house has got a giant swimming pool in it, and on stuff. And I'm looking out her windows. She's a great person, wonderful person, really nice, humane, decent person. But she's obviously living in circumstances that were not totally alien to me, because I'd visited similar places. But to have a friend that was in this circumstance, and I'm up in this giant living room, and there's these panoramic windows out looking over these sort of rolling fields outside. And I noticed nowhere in the house are there any curtains. And I asked her, I noticed there's no curtains in this place. And she said, she named her husband. She said, well, so and so, he knew I didn't like curtains. So he bought all the adjoining estates and made sure there's no sight lines between any house and ours. And this is a part of the world where the land is incredibly expensive, and all I could see were these trees out beyond these fields and no other people. And I said to myself, holy shit. I mean, this is inconceivable. Something like that that's casually mentioned is inconceivable to me. So this is kind of a long way of saying, as F. Scott Fitzgerald coined the phrase, the rich are different from you and me. And uh, it popped into my mind, and I looked around and I said, well, I guess that's so, because these people live in a way in which I have no frame of reference. They have a set of ideas about how the way the world works that don't have much to do with me or anybody I spend time with on a day-to-day, my employees or my business associates or finance people, whatever. They don't live like, none of them live like that. All right. And I can't relate. And it was sad, because I knew that would probably be my last visit there, because what point of reference could there possibly be between what I was doing, selling X-ray and security equipment around the world, and someone that sits in the office and watches the stock on the various companies they own go up and down on the screen, which is basically what they do. They're watching the thing going up and down. I mean, that's not me. What I'm saying, but the real distinction is when I spoke to this person as a person, she was still the lovely, sweet, nice lady I knew back in the 1960s.
So there are nice billionaires that we shouldn't hate.
No, well, you might want to hate the effects, but you shouldn't hate the people unless they give you a reason to do so. Like steal all the data of every human being in the United States to enrich yourself, or participate in the transfer
Well,
of
that's
wealth from the
so. Do you
least of
do
us
you
to the
hate
most.
do you hate the people that are responsible for that? Are you saying that you feel actual hate?
Yes, the ones that I saw standing behind you know who on Inauguration Day.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, Someone who, in this climate, spends $55 million on a wedding in Venice amidst, you know, massive protests outside of the cordoned off area, right?
So
In this
how do you deal with that
particular
hate? I
climate.
mean, is that hate really worth it? Is it worth troubling
The
yourself
hate,
over something that's so
it's
far
not,
away and so removed from our reality?
right. It's not worth, here's where it comes down to the rational part. Those people are not worth taking personally, feeling personally persecuted, personally oppressed, even though you may be, right, in some to some degree. The ones who are really being oppressed are the people that are less fortunate than me.
Yeah,
The people really paying the price are the ones who will be the 12 million people without health insurance.
yeah.
The
And
people really paying.
anybody who has brown skin. I mean, it's just
All right. Well, the estimate is that
so.
50,000 extra deaths a
Yeah,
year as
yeah,
a result of losing. Now,
yeah,
that's oppression.
yeah.
But let me tell you something about money.
So
Anybody
what
can
does
get
your
oppressed
hate have to do with that though? What if you're saying that you have hate towards the people that are responsible for that?
because it's if you let it go too far and you don't use your rational mind to control it, it could take over your mind. It could even take over your day to day happiness, which I have in abundance. I know you're a happy guy. I know for a fact, and my day to day life here with the person I live with and the circumstances I'm living with. Uh, Even though we do have some issues related to Washington stuff, which I won't go into here, that are pretty damn personal. But in general, uh, I live a very fortunate and very happy and very secure life. I've survived all kinds of things uh, and adversities, and am now alive here talking to you, trying to be of some assistance to my fellow alcoholics and addicts by discussing things that could be problematic.
Well,
But I can't let but my feelings for this group that's involved, the group that's directly involved, the group that's taking people's health, welfare, and freedom away is profound. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm not going to say that I've washed myself of the hatred I have for them, which I do have. I hate the motherfuckers. Okay, it just there's no two ways about it. All right, and I'm sure they've got a place for me in Guantanamo or down there in Alligator Alcatraz or whatever other resorts Kristi Noem and her capitalist buddies are constructing for people that don't toe the line.
So
I'm sure
how do you
there's
control that hate so that it doesn't lead to? I mean, I'm assuming that there are people out there who are trying to stay sober, who can't control their hate and go over the top and end up going to the liquor store because they don't have a way to control that hate.
because your connection to them is really not personal, even though we do take things personally, and sometimes things can even spill over into our own lives and affect us personally. And they're not worth your hate. You might hate them, but they're not really worth it.
Well, what can you tell people to keep their hate from turning into anger, which then turns into either self-destructive or being destructive to other people? How do you get to a point where you can control that? And
You have to rationally separate yourself from them. Do they really have power over me and my actions and my feelings and my day to day existence? No. I have control over that. When I let my hatred for them consume me and allow me to be, and put me in a situation where I'm existing in a state of anger on a regular, daily, hour to hour basis, I've lost my autonomy. And it's not worth it to lose your autonomy. You have to focus on the important things in your life. And for us, abstinence is an extremely important thing we need to stay focused on, which gives us access to the wonderful things that you can have in your life, which I've had and have. And for whatever years, few or maybe a few more, I don't know, for whatever years I've got left, I can't afford to waste those years on them. Even though there's things we have to do from time to time to express ourselves, like being on the street, on the No Kings Day a few weeks ago with, some thousands of my fellow. And then, before at the Washington Monument, a couple months before that, being with a couple 100,000 of my fellow Americans that disagree with this. And just do the best you can in the outside world. Don't ignore the outside. Don't hide under a bush in your garden, Michael. Okay.
well, I think I not necessarily hide, but I definitely turn to my garden to find peace within myself
Well,
and to realize, because I mean, there's so little I can do about the bigger picture.
right, right,
And I know that I can very easily take that anger route and turn it into self-destruction. I'm very familiar with that process from the past. I mean, that's how I always dealt with anger and hatred and any of those strong emotions. I would just avoid it all by crawling into a bottle, So I think that using positive things like gardening for me, making art. I mean, I'm very, very fortunate to be able to make art and spend my time doing something creative and positive. I think that's one way for me to balance out all that negativity that's happening
right,
outside of me. Do something positive.
right. And that's what we try to do in the best way we can. All right. Um,
But I have to say, man, the temptation's there. I mean, I spent a lot of years of my life as a vandal. That's how I expressed my anger and my hatred. I mean, I broke things and I mean, did a lot of stupid, bad, negative things.
that's not
And
an option for people like us. and where we are in society and where we are as people, nonviolence is the only option. All right. We don't have other options that other people may think they have. We don't have those options. We have to remain part of the solution without becoming criminal. All right. We're not going to do that. All right. We're not that. We're not Bolsheviks blowing up churches like I mentioned before. All
Right,
right.
right, right. Yeah,
Uh, if I saw one of them in a restaurant, my tendency would be to walk up to one of them wearing one of those crosses they like to wear. You see them on TV all the time, and grab for that effing cross and, you know, and try to shove it down somebody's throat. But I couldn't and wouldn't do that because A, it's not right and it's not my place to lay hands on someone. And B, the quite practical thing is if they threw me on the ground and some of the stuff I've got wrong with me, uh, like they did the senator from California a few weeks ago,
right.
right? I probably wouldn't be getting up. I'd probably be getting taken to the hospital because I wouldn't do well in a situation like that and not really physically equipped. So, there's a lot of practical reasons, but there's also the difference between right and wrong. We don't pray, we don't believe in God, but we know the difference between right and wrong. And our sobriety and our peace of mind that we've gained from that has led us to a more rational position that allows us to conduct ourselves as citizens without becoming something or someone else. We might think about it. We might be so upset that we'd like to do something about it, but we don't because we are rational beings who work out our lives in a measured and more considered way than we ever did when we were drinking or drugging,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, we take responsibility for ourselves, and we don't pass the buck when we're feeling these things. We embrace it and recognize it and rationally deal with it.
Right. And we try, at least I am trying, and I've been thinking about this because I was getting so wound up that I was beginning to hate whole groups of people that live in certain places. Like you're a real nice fella. You live in Indiana. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in places like Indiana that I don't like. Okay.
Tell me about it. Jeez. Yeah,
Okay. I mean,
yeah,
there's,
yeah.
I mean, but I live here in Maryland in my little enclave, and I can look out at the world and try to categorize whole groups of people who I have never met, who I don't know, whose uh, whose myopic stupidity in casting a vote for a sociopath is causing all kinds of trouble, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are exactly and precisely hateful and evil.
Yeah, it's hard not to summarize all Republicans
Personify them.
as a group
Personify them. Well,
as a group like that.
yeah, I
But
I buy
it's
stuff.
tempting. It's certainly
Yeah,
tempting. I
right,
mean,
right. I'm a real lefty, but I love to
especially here
buy
in
America.
Indiana, when you see the Republicans have taken over even the universities and they're eliminating programs and cuts at everything. I mean, it's hard not to generalize about that group of people. I mean, but again, I can't personally feel hatred. I feel sympathy and sadness and disappointment. I refuse to go the hateful route because I know for me that hateful route tends to build up anger, which my way of expressing anger is very self destructive in the past. and I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to that self-destructive route. So I do everything I can to avoid turning that irrational hatred into anger and doing
Right.
something positive.
Right. And what we're doing by doing this is uh, taking what we've learned in recovery, what we've learned in sobriety with our rational mind, not the irrational, angel on your shoulder or
Yeah, yeah.
confession booth or God box or whatever the
God's
fuck.
will, not mine.
God's will, not mine, all that horse shit.
Yeah, yeah.
But we've learned and incorporated that into our lives, and we can get to a place where I did a little exercise the other day. Something occurred to me when I was thinking about how I tend to categorize people and condemn them as a massive group. I mean, there's 73 million of them out there, right, that did this. And I can get myself into a headspace where I hate all 73 million of them.
Yeah.
And that's not the way to be.
Right.
And I did a little mental exercise just to try not to use up too much time because we don't have much time left with this episode. But I like to buy American stuff. All right. I'm a lefty that likes American stuff, right? I've got a lot of clothes and shoes and other things around here that I like to buy American stuff. And there's a place that makes American stuff out in the deepest, deep red part of Trump country. And they make nice American stuff. But they sent me, 6 months ago or so, they sent me some defective American stuff for the first time. I've bought a lot of things from them and I never had a problem, but I had a little issue. And they have a helpline. And unlike when you call Mr. Bezos, there's an American, but when you call Mr. Bezos's line, there's a nice gentleman in India or Pakistan that answers. When you call out there, there's a very nice lady, very sweet lady that answers. And we have a nice little chat, and she immediately solves the problem perfectly. And we both felt good about about the little conversation we had. Cordial, reasonable conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I have absolutely no earthly idea that person could have gone in the voting booth and done whatever, what I
Yeah, yeah,
consider to
yeah.
be horrific and statistically quite
She might have
likely.
had a red hat on while she was speaking to you.
She might have had one of the. I mean, I'm glad there was no. I couldn't have gotten over the red hat. I have to admit,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just can't.
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't deal with the fucking red
There's a
hats
time and place for
and
video
the fake
chatting.
flagpole he put up that makes the White House look like an auto dealership in
Yeah.
Alabama, and such incredible bad taste. But we have a perfectly beautiful historic flagpole on the top of the White House, and he has to put one of those auto dealer things. Remember the auto dealers? It's
Yep.
one of those. He put that
Yeah.
fucking thing up. But to get to the point, I have no right to make any judgments about that nice lady on the phone that I met on the phone as a human being, as a
Yeah.
person, no matter what she may have in her makeup as a person that I don't like. I have no right to judge her as an individual. I have to keep telling myself this because I'm so fucking angry. I've got to keep that shit under control. And, I mean, hating whole groups of people is what a lot of these people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
The criminal,
They're showing us what not to
insane,
do. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing
yeah,
that, and
yeah,
we don't want to
yeah,
do that.
yeah, yeah. Senile Joe opened the border and let
Right.
millions of
Right.
criminally insane, destructive people. Not that's the guy that makes your sandwich or handles your laundry or builds the office building down the block from me. It was only immigrants that took care of my babies when they were babies. What the hell are we doing here? Okay. But I don't want to, I don't want to be that way, because we got sober and we tried to live a more decent life than that. And right now it's really fucking hard to do,
Yeah,
which is why this
yeah,
episode came to
yeah,
mind. It's, I don't do therapy that much, but it's therapeutic to talk about this stuff
yeah,
and try to be human in the middle of an inhuman situation,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
for me, it's recognizing that there are certain things outside of me that are triggers, but they trigger my past way of dealing with things, and I have to stay aware of that and accept that, and learn from that, and take a positive route instead.
Yeah, well, in a secular way, using our rational mind, we have to come around somehow as people to use your favorite word.
Hope, man. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a challenge hanging on to hope lately, but I mean, we meet, like you talking to somebody who you're getting doing a service call with somebody. There's positive human behavior that balances it out for us and reminds us that it isn't all going to hell. I mean, there's a lot of really
Well,
good positive things happening on this planet,
we
and
don't want,
we
yeah,
just cannot dwell on all that negativity all the time.
right. And we don't want to turn into the type of person that uses alligators
Yeah,
to terrorize
yeah,
others.
yeah,
Okay? We don't want to
yeah.
be that person
I
either.
can learn from their behavior, things that I don't want to be like. I don't want to be
I've,
like that. I don't want to
I've
be like that person.
I've learned from this discussion, and we're coming down to the waning moments of it, and so much of it boils down to us attempting to reach for something within us that's better than all of this that we're seeing around us, and it's really hard. And I really do hope that none of the people we deal with in recovery are using or thinking of using or thinking of any sort of desperation or desperate move as a result of this.
Yeah, yeah,
Because if we get that way, we separate ourselves from, the state that we always try to end this podcast with, which is a state where we look to the future with the the word hope,
yes, hope.
and try to imbue what little bit remains of our own lives and the lives, and hopefully the much longer lives of the younger people around us, with this idea of peace and love, right?
Peace and love.
Which
I
is
think
where
one thing that, just to sum it up for me, that what I've learned in sobriety is that the best I can do is try to live better than I used to, and keep my little part of the world positive and creative and moving forward instead of moving backwards.
right. Well,
And that's
this
how I can embrace that sense of hope.
exactly. And despite our failures, we try to maintain that attitude to the best of our ability, uh, but we aren't perfect. But we do say at the end of our chats here, we wish everyone peace and love.
Peace and love.
And, well, God, the fist comes up again. I'm not perfect. What can I say?
I know.
Life's like that. We're wishing everybody a very good afternoon or evening or good night or
Yeah.
wherever the hell you are in the world,
Hang on to
hoping
your
that
hope.
life is better for all of us sometime soon.
Yeah.
We'll see you.
Peace and love.